Welcome to our show. It's a lovely rainy day in South Florida, and our special guest today is noted attorney and author Mr. John Contini. He'll share his views on the judicial system and his thoughts on his books and public opinion regarding the wonderful reaction he's had to his books and of course many other topics of his choice and ours following these messages. With us now is John Contini, the well-known author and attorney. It's a pleasure to have you with us on the show, finally.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate very much being here.
I'd like to ask you a first question. Since you reside in Broward County, Florida, what are your thoughts regarding the judicial system here? What are the challenges facing the judicial system in general at this time in history?
Broward County has some very fine judges, Richard, but we have too many that now tend to legislate from the bench. Rather than let the adversarial system do its thing and let the advocates advocate their respective positions, the judges are interjecting too much of themselves into the proceedings, and too many of them have an agenda, quite frankly, that is disturbing. And what's interesting is the other challenge you mentioned about Broward County. We lead the planet Earth in number of people incarcerated per capita. People freak out when they hear that statistic, but it's true. Broward County is number one of 67 counties in Florida. We now lead Florida for number of people incarcerated. Florida now leads the nation. We were number 4 behind California, Texas, and New York, but we're really number 1 now because we're 6th in general population. So per capita, we have more people incarcerated in Florida than any state in the nation. And then the U.S. just passed China. Here we're watching the Olympics and we're looking at China, but we just passed China for prison population. So if you do the math, if A equals B and B equals C, a syllogism, therefore A equals C, Broward County leads the state of Florida in most people incarcerated. Florida leads the nation now in number of people incarcerated per capita, and the nation leads the world. So that means Broward County, where we live, has more people locked up than any place on planet Earth. And that's a frightening statistic. So you ask about challenges in the system, Broward County, that's a huge challenge. What do you do when 70% of all crimes committed during the day are committed by kids, suspended from school to a program? No, they're not suspended to a program, they're suspended to the streets. And so the sheriff has a truancy program. He goes out and finds them, picks them up. Where's he going to bring them? Parents aren't there. So he brings them to the parents' job and he's giving the kids to the parents, say, okay, we're done babysitting them, now it's your turn. And that's what's going on, thankfully, because we have a sheriff that's doing something about it. But it's very, very frightening because we live in a very unforgiving world now. Everything is a felony. What years ago when we were growing up, if you took a pack of gum or a little girl takes a pair of earrings from Claire's, misdemeanor, petty theft. Today, you have 2 little incidents over this gum or some little $3 item. It's a felony now. Kids don't know that. Everything's a felony. You try to run away from the police. Years ago, it might be a misdemeanor. It's a felony. They don't know this. Everything is a felony now. There are mandatory minimums now. They think, well, I'll get probation. No, no. There's a 3-year mandatory minimum prison sentence attached to just about everything now. Who's benefiting? Wackenhut. The privatization of these prisons. We had 1 jail in Broward County. When I started off as a prosecutor, we had 1. We have 5 now. They're building a 6th in just 1 county. Privatization of prisons. The only construction boom now in this terrible real estate market right now, prisons and all the cottage industries that are springing up around the food industry in the prisons, you name it. There's a little cottage industry. So this is going on. It's not a palm trees and boating and all the pretty things in Broward that you see if you're a tourist. That's not what's going on. The biggest industry in Broward County right now is law enforcement. And I wrote something on a MySpace called Come to Florida, Bring the Kids, Don't Forget the Bail Money. I wrote that just from my heart one day. 13,000 views in the last 60 days. People, apparently it's going viral. It's resonating with people because they know this is a frightening time for young people. There's no second chances, and I'm a man of faith. So I'm into second chances from the God of second chances. Well, that's nice from a faith perspective, but in this secular system, we have a very, very, very unforgiving world that our kids are living in right now. There are no second chances.
That's all very interesting, John. And I was thinking about the causes, really. The causes of all of this crime and the questions of the irresponsibility of the social environment we live in general. And I don't want to get into the causes of the excessive crime, but I'd like to ask you the following. You articulate on these subjects, yet you defend criminals, regardless of whether they're guilty or not. Please explain that.
Very good question. Touché. People ask me all the time, how can you defend people you know are guilty? And I get this from people in the faith community, and I am a Christian, and people in the church will ask me, how can you defend people you know are guilty? Now, they're not asking me that question because they really want to know how I do it. It's a rhetorical question. They're basically saying, in an interrogatory fashion, there's no way I could ever do what you do. I would never defend someone I knew was guilty. Now, meanwhile, keep in mind, 9 out of 10 times, that's the same person. When their son Joey gets arrested, they're in my office beating the table, screaming about how the police never read Miranda rights to little Joey. They're talking out of both corners of their mouth. They want justice for the next guy who stands accused. They want justice for that guy. He ought to go off to see the wizard, go to prison. But they want mercy when it's one of their loved ones. Last thing they want is justice then. Isn't that interesting? The same Spirit-filled believers that'll ask me that question. But to really cut to the chase, I can defend anybody for doing anything, however horrific, on one condition. The Florida bar says I have to defend them zealously. They use the word zealously. I don't have to take the case. If I take the case, they're right. I have to defend them zealously. I don't have to take the case, however. I will take the case unapologetically, and I enjoy helping people, and I make no apologies for it, regardless of how guilty they are, if, and here's the big if, they have to be repentant. What does that mean? The biblical root word translation for repentant is change of direction, change of mind. It doesn't mean remorse, like some people think, where you feel badly. No. Most of these guys, they feel badly, they got caught. Some people, however, truly do feel badly, that they've ruined their life, they've ruined their mom and dad's life, they've ruined everybody in their family, they're weeping and gnashing of teeth, everybody's upset, because when someone in the family has a problem, the whole family has a problem. It's not an individual problem anymore. So some people truly feel genuinely badly for everybody in their family that they've hurt. And if they want a change of mind, a change of direction, if they are repentant and want another chance, and I believe in my spirit, and I believe I have a pretty decent spirit of discernment, that they're not going to go out and do it again. And they want help for their cocaine addiction or their alcoholism or whatever bipolarity they have, and they're willing to take medication, and they're willing to go to group sessions and process their issues and go inpatient, etc. And I can minimize their plight and keep them out of prison and help them get a second chance. I'll do that all day long without apology. And that's my own particular standard that I put on top of the Florida bar's standard that I represent these people zealously. And that question I'm asked so often that I actually wrote about it on my website, which is jpcontini.com. Criminal defense, a mission field with a question mark. Like, is it a mission field? Yes, and I explained why. It really can be a mission field if done right. And I have other little blog articles on there. How can you be a Christian and defend people that you know are guilty? That's another article. And there's a number, another one is a reasonable doubt, proof of the gospel beyond a reasonable doubt. There are a number of faith articles on that jpcontini.com that have to do with this very same tough question. And it's a fair question. And my wife tends to think I answer it too defensively, that it's a normal question that most people would ask. And yet, to me, it's a little puzzling when people of faith ask me that question, when the Christians, if you will, in my church ask me how I can defend people that I know are guilty. I feel like saying, well, I'm glad your Messiah and mine, Christ, didn't think like you, or else we'd all be toast. Every one of us. We all want a second chance from the God of second chances. And when I think it was Peter asked Jesus, how many times shall we forgive? 7? And Jesus said, 70 times 7. And he also said, in response to other questions of his disciples, he who has been forgiven of much loveth much. And when they asked him, well, when the guy forgives 50 denarii versus 500 denarii, two different guys, one owed 50, one owed 500, both debts were forgiven, which one would love more? He said, well, naturally, the one that was forgiven of 500 denarii. So there's so many examples I can point to in the Bible where the more we've done, frankly, that we're not proud of, the more we've been forgiven of, once we truly get it, the more we're grateful and the more thankful we are, and therefore, to some extent, the more we're going to end up loving and being appreciative. And I think that's in Matthew 9:12. He was at a dinner party when the disciples asked him, well, actually, they didn't have the Pharisees didn't have the courage to ask Christ. They asked his disciples, how can your master eat with tax collectors and sinners? Same question I'm asked. How can you defend people you know are guilty? And Jesus answered, because he's omniscient, he heard that, and he answered for his disciples, and he said, it's not the healthy who need a physician, but the sick. I've come not to call the righteous to salvation, but sinners. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So it's all about mercy. And again, people want to beat the justice drum, and that guy needs justice. He needs to go to prison. But they want to rub the mercy seat when it's their loved ones. Well, which is it? Are we going to have a double standard? Mercy for you and your loved ones and justice for everybody else? I have very little patience for those who want to apply a double standard. In the Torah, in Proverbs, several times God uses Solomon to repeat in Proverbs how dishonest scales and differing weights and measures are an abomination to the Lord, meaning he wants the same weights and measures applied to everybody across the board. And so we need to remember that as we, whether you're a Christian, whether you're Jewish, whatever your faith, differing scales, differing measures are no good, frankly.
John, this is really very interesting, and you've talked about biblical matters, and I'd like us to continue right after these commercial messages. We're back with John Contini. John, we were talking about very interesting subjects a little earlier, and I apologize to the viewer. We are taping this interview in Coral Springs, Florida, and there is a thunderstorm outside. But perhaps that is a good sign, by the way, the thunderstorm, because we are talking about rather dramatic things here right now. But anyway, I'd like to ask you your views in general on justice in this world we're living in which we see different standards that exist. We have the Judeo-Christian ethics and morality, yet we live in a world in which civilization itself is being threatened by Islamic terrorism at this time. Speaking of law and order and accountability, we see terrorists supported and harbored and enabled by some Muslim countries. We're witnessing a situation in which much of the world stands by while irresponsible regimes provide a cooperative environment for terrorist organizations to exist in. And what I mean by enabling is simply the following. No terrorist organization can exist unless it is conveniently facilitated, provided with facilities, campsites, and training grounds, banking, funding, communications, transportation, food and medical, and all of the other services. And really, it is this cooperation and enabling which is regarded by many people in the world simply as collusion. What are your thoughts on this?
That's a great word you used a moment ago, collusion, and how the world is watching while these regimes do what they do. It reminds me of, I think it was 1939 that Hitler went into Poland, but if you go back before that, the world was watching Hitler do what he did, and nobody was doing anything about it at that time. Now, eventually, everybody was forced to do something about it, thank God. I just hate to see history repeat itself, and yet I'm very, very concerned that that's what's going on. And Jews and Christians are brothers and sisters. We must stick together, and any good Christian today who knows his or her Bible knows to be pro-Israel, that we are one family. We share the same Jehovah God. We share the same Bible, the Old and the New Testament. Those people that don't understand it or don't get it, those Christians who purport to be Christians, whatever denomination they come from, they're just cultural Christians if they have any anti-Semitism or if they don't understand that we must absolutely support Israel at all times. We're brothers and sisters. And if they don't understand that, then they just are culturally calling themselves Christians because their parents may have been. And collusion and complicity is what everybody today is guilty of if they stand by and watch these regimes, these terrorist organizations in Arab countries that sponsor state-sponsored terrorism. And you talk about money and what's enabling them. What enables them is money. And look at the mortgage crisis. We're finding out, and I'm a criminal defense lawyer, I can tell you more and more of these mortgage fraud cases are involving terrorist organizations and terrorists that are benefiting from all these sophisticated mortgage scams. And I've been talking to FBI agents that are on these task forces, and you can hear the storm in the background, and that's what's going on in our lives in South Florida right now. We lead the nation in the mortgage crisis right now. I just read yesterday, 156 days the average property in South Florida is on the market, worse than any place in the country. And home values are down 43% here, worse than any place in the country. 7,000 foreclosures a day, 93% increase in foreclosures, all because of slippery, strike that, in large measure because of slippery mortgage fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, very sophisticated stated income and all kinds of bizarre mortgage products. And who's using a lot of these? Terrorists. How do I know that? Certain cases I have, FBI agents who have confided in me on cases that I have with them now. Slippery Arabic terrorist organizations are using our ridiculous laws that allow and facilitate mortgage fraud to get money out of equity that didn't really exist at all in these properties, money that they can then fuel and enable, to use your word, these regimes to do this state-sponsored terrorism, all in the name of Allah, supposedly, but to decimate Israel and the United States, who they call the Great Satan. It's right here, South Florida, right here.
Yes, that's true, John. The terrorists who attacked the World Trade Center on 9/11 were training and residing right here in South Florida. Pretty shocking. I'd like to change subjects and talk about something more positive. Tell us about the books you've written.
Thank you for bringing up the books. I appreciate that very much. Danger Road is the longest trial in Broward County history. I defended a police officer who was accused of a lot of murders in Broward for organized crime. It became the longest trial in Broward's history. I have 3 children. 2 of my children, believe it or not, were born during the trial. That's how long it was. There were 4 prosecutors against me. They all made big names for themselves. One's a judge now, one's a city commissioner. 3 of them got married during the trial, 2 to each other. That's how long it was. Our personal lives are inextricably interconnected with the events in the trial, but it's all about justice at all costs. Strike that. It's not about justice. That's the whole point of the book, too, is our justice system is essentially indicted on certain levels in the book because the games that we lawyers play, and I was guilty too. It wasn't about justice at all. It was about winning at all costs. And the Machiavellian machinations that trial lawyers will sometimes exploit and perpetrate to win at all costs, especially when somebody's life hangs in the balance. The trial lawyer who's defending, like in my case, I defended him. When you delude yourself into believing that what you say, or more important, what you forget to say, someone's life can hang in the balance of that, there's a lot of pressure. You tend to do things that you are not proud of, frankly. I fall on my sword in the book and I talk about that. And there's an old saying, our sickness lies in our secrets. So it was a purgation of sorts. It was cathartic for me. And old enemies became friends through this book. We hated each other as prosecutors, and myself, the defense lawyer, we were at each other's throats. Later, when I wrote the book, I took them all to lunch individually at the Cheesecake Factory on Las Olas, and I let them weigh in. They're all judges now, and they're kind of famous in their own right. And I wanted to hear from them why they did what they did. Statutes of limitations have run. People are safer now in talking about the old days. we became friends through the process. It was amazing. So what I never expected to happen, happened. We all became friends, and the truth ultimately did emanate or come out on many levels through the writing of this book. It's not necessarily flattering on me, but it wasn't about that. It was about just getting it out of me. People ask me, well, why'd you write this book if it's not all that flattering? Well, I just felt like I needed to get this off my chest, frankly. I have to keep secrets as a criminal defense lawyer. I have to keep everybody's secrets, the attorney-client privilege. That doesn't mean I have to keep my own. And that's what this was about, frankly. And it was difficult to write. Most of these books are written by reporters who covered the trial, or detectives, homicide detectives. It's almost never the case a criminal defense lawyer can write a book like this, because what about the attorney-client privilege? It was an ethical minefield that I had to tiptoe through in writing this book. One thing you'll notice if you get the book is I never say he did not do it. I never say he did it. I leave it up to the readers, the ultimate jury, to tell us. And so if you want to get the book, it's 1-800-957-6476, or the website is on dangerroadthebook.com. I'm not selling them, but if you're interested, that's how to get the books.
John, this has been most interesting. I have your book, and I have the new one also, which I will read. It's been a real pleasure, and we should have you on the show again one of these days.
Thank you, Richard. I love being here. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'll be right back. This brings us to the end of our special show for today. From On Location in South Florida, I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.